Hello, everyone. Good afternoon. I'm here with another talk, a very interesting one, with a lovely presenter. I have here Gabriela Fróes, and Gabriela is going to talk about de-tabooing sexuality in the ELT classroom. Gabriela has been teaching for 13 years. She holds a BA in English, an MA in English Literature, a CPE, and a CELTA. She's also a member of Voices SIG, and if you don't know Voices, you should, because they're great women. So, Gabriela, over to you.
Thank you, Tiago, for your kind words. I would also like to thank Fróes for holding this event. This is an opportunity of a lifetime for me. And thanks to everyone watching this presentation. I hope it helps you think of the things we're going to discuss here today. So now I'm going to share my screen with you. Okay. I don't know if it's working. Can you see my screen? Think so?
Yes, we can see your screen.
Okay. Now in presenting mode?
Yes.
Okay, it's working. Great. So I'm going to start by telling you that this is not a coming out story, but it is a coming out story. Because it's a story about my relationship with LGBT issues in the classroom. So let's start. When I was a little girl back in the mid-80s, growing up in the countryside of the beautiful Rio de Janeiro, I used to have the hots for Cazuza, one of the all-time greatest singer-songwriters of Brazilian pop rock music. I would watch him incessantly on TV, which was all we had back in the 80s. I would make drawings of him. I'm very sorry, I don't have those anymore. And I would sing his songs with eyes closed, filled with all those emotions that a 9-year-old can express, on lyrics about a hopeless government system, depression, or all the love we can have in this life. A few months after I turned 9, Cazuza died of AIDS. And it was a very public death, exposed and explored by the media. And one of the strongest images I have of that time is a magazine cover issued just after his death, on which we could see him as he was, or at least as he was portrayed to the general public, a weak body that wanted to remain strong. And even today, almost 30 years later, the memories that most fans have of him isn't of AIDS, but rather of the strong young man who was brave enough to stand up for himself, to be seen the way he wanted to be seen. I kept a drawing that I made of these two pictures inside my favorite drawer, and I have always wished that for myself, to be seen the way I wanted to be seen. Don't we all? And then I can honestly say that I became a teacher because I wanted to have a voice. I started my graduation in English thinking about more secluded work, like translation jobs or maybe research, something I envisioned as a lonely private job. I had this image of something entirely intellectual when I saw myself as a future Hemingway. And suddenly I was depressed, lonely, and desperate. So I started to look for solutions. And that's when teaching happened. But then I realized that we don't become teachers to have a voice. We become teachers to give a voice. And this is so much better. It feels so much better. Almost like a superpower. the power to empower other people. So this talk will be about my journey to give other people voice. But before I get to that, I'm going to tell you why. So the first question I want to answer is, why am I giving this talk? Using the example of before, I think it's safe to state that Cazuza was a man of his time, that he became famous and heard because he was bold enough to be himself. And this has a lot to do with education, because we need education to be a safe space for people to be themselves, for students to discover themselves. We have lots and lots of brave young people just waiting for this space. Not everyone is bold enough or brave enough from birth. Not everyone has the opportunities that he had, a wealthy family, a famous friend, and we need education to allow people to belong to something. And I don't see in our classroom today that students feel that they all belong to something. The suicide rates are there for everyone to see. The marginalization of LGBT people, the violence numbers are shocking. We need to start doing something from an early age, and this will be beneficial for everyone, for them to become better citizens. So this is a little summary of what we are going to see. I'm going to start by talking about inclusion in general, which is, in my opinion, the most important thing that can happen in a classroom. It is what makes learning something easier. Then I'm going to tell you someone else's story, the story of Lucy, a teacher like you and me, and her epiphany on LGBT matters in the classroom, how it all started for her, and how she realized how important it is to make all students feel equally included, even though equality might not be the best word choice, and I'll tell you why later on. After that, I'm going to tell you my story. I will use a former student, Dora, as an example of how we all go through this at some point in our careers. And we need to learn how to use it to our advantage so that we can make the classroom safer and more inclusive. Then I intend to discuss the importance of making LGBT students feel included in our classrooms. And mind you, this is the topic of my talk, and this is why I'm highlighting LGBT students, because all students must feel included. But we cannot simply suppose they all do as a whole and not think of each one of them individually. So this is what I'm going to discuss at this point. To better illustrate how a teacher can change the classroom in a way that it becomes more inclusive without putting anyone on the spot, I'm going to suggest some practical activities, just a few examples, so you can understand what I'm talking about. They are not time-consuming at all, but it does take a little planning. Once you start doing it, however, you will notice it's totally worth it. And to prove that, I'm going to talk a little bit about the results of this in my classroom. Some immediate results and some long-term results that I could only see years after a lesson was taught. And I will close my talk by showing you where we Brazilians are on this matter and where we could and should be. I intend to share some teaching standards that have been written elsewhere so we can see how much better we can become if we all work on it together. So let's start. Last November 15th, Professor Verinder Unlu, coordinator of the new IATF-OSIG Inclusive Practices, published an article on the Cambridge Learning website entitled How to Create an Inclusive Classroom Environment. One of the things Verinder mentions in her article is about the importance of self-evaluating. So I would like to start showing you two of the questions that she proposes. I would like you to think about it with me a little bit. So for each question, I want you to think about the most honest answer possible, okay? Consider your own practices when you try to answer them, and think about yes or no, simple as that. I'll show you the question, And I'll give you a few seconds to think about that. So question number 1. Does how you teach acknowledge the experiences of the students from different backgrounds? So here, what I want to know is if you think about a diverse classroom when you are preparing your lessons, even if you don't have a diverse classroom, do you consider that? Question 2. Are your students encouraged to share their own lives and interests? When you prepare your lessons, do you think about their preferences and interests? Do you cater not for learning styles, but rather for lifestyles? So that's the end of our self-evaluation. Thank you for taking part in that with me. Now, Verinder also suggests in her article, she suggests 5 inclusivity practices for teachers to take into account when preparing lessons. And with one of those, I would like to move to my actual topic of today, which is to talk about sexuality and gender issues. She says, and I quote, "Create a supportive, respectful environment. Promote diversity and fairness." I would like for us to stop and think about that for a moment, because it's a very important thing to think about. And I believe that not always do we really worry about that in a classroom. I mean, we're teachers. You know that, right? We work 50 hours a week or more. We prepare lessons, we mark tests, we read writing texts that are not always enticing. More often than not, we feel, I don't know about you, but I do feel guilty for not finding the right amount of time to dedicate to lesson preparation. Not the way I would really like to. And many times I've realized halfway through a lesson that I could have done so much more for them in that lesson. And with that, inclusion, if not integrated as part of a daily routine, turns into more work. It becomes something heavier than it should. Like I have to prepare this lesson on present perfect, and it cannot simply be about the 7 wonders of the world because they're 12 and they have no idea what it means. So if I have to use the book, I need way more material than that. And on top of it all, I have to include inclusion. I'm pretty sure this is how many of us feel. I've been there, done that. So how do we create a supportive, respectful environment that promotes diversity and fairness every lesson? Now for Lucy's story. Lucy is a pseudonym for a teacher that was interviewed as a part of a research project entitled Exploring LGBT Lives and Issues in Adult ESOL. It was funded by the British Council, and it aimed to promote innovation in ELT research. Basically, the research project interviewed more than 100 tutors, first through an online questionnaire and later with recorded interviews with some of these tutors, and one of them was Lucy. As I read the report, I realized that I could be one of these tutors. I still have so much to learn. One of the things that called my attention the most in her speech was that she stated that LGBT issues are hidden in ESOL. I was curious to understand what she meant by that, so the report goes on with her justification. She describes a lesson where she invited students to guess aspects of her personal life, This classic warm-up activity we all have tried out in our careers. She had put circles on the board to represent these aspects. One of the circles included her house type, another circle included her middle name, which is Mary. An Iranian woman, known in the report as B, asked if Mary was her partner. And then Lucy tried to explain it was her middle name, but suddenly she felt worried about how to deal with the topic. She didn't want to sound offensive by denying it, so she doesn't deny it, but at the same time, she doesn't address the issue any further. It feels like she was not expecting this kind of question to happen at all. That was her first uncomfortable moment. Some minutes later, she asks students to draw their own circles. And she notices a Polish learner struggling as he didn't know what to write in his circles. So the teacher, Lucy, asked him, "Are you married?" And he said no. So she asked if he had a girlfriend. He said no. Then it hit her, and she asked, "Have you got a partner?" And he said yes, and that his name was Peter. And she said that she had never previously considered that a student might be gay. The report says, and I quote, that this learning moment for Lucy, brought by B into the earliest stages of a course, allowed her to see that LGBT learners want and need to be visible in her classroom, and that she could, by recognizing that possibility and not closing it down, make the space in which sexual diversity is acknowledged as part of people's family life. Another interesting thing that I learned from this report was that from the around 100 respondents, 1/4 recorded that learners had raised LGBT issues in class. And this is something that happens or can happen if you're a teacher. We need to be prepared to deal with it in a way that validates that learner's identity and that at the same time reinforces for the other students that this validation is of great importance. And that has happened to me. I have had in my career many learners raising LGBT issues in class. It felt important to me then that I myself started raising these issues as well. And this has slowly helped me build this environment of inclusivity that I see my classroom becoming. So my next step here is to tell you a story, to show you that this doesn't happen only in adult groups. And it's a story about how it started for me and how I suddenly saw myself pushed in a nice way to do things differently. This happened a while ago. I was teaching a group of young teens, age range 11, 12 years old. And one of these girls in the class, let's call her Dora, was very loud about declaring herself a bisexual girl. Of course, this is not a big deal in older groups, especially in a big capital like Rio de Janeiro, where I come from and where I was teaching at the time. Sexuality was a fairly openly discussed topic in my classrooms. I had always tried to promote diversity in the lessons, but usually by talking about it. I would bring material for them to read or to watch and then discuss. And I feel that all older teenagers and adults, they have felt very comfortable talking about it in the lessons. But back to Dora. So at first, I did not want to take it seriously because, well, they're 12. What do they know about sexuality? So in my mind, she had probably just seen that somewhere on TV and was trying to shock her friends, to be different. Dora was that kind of girl that would go to school dressed with many flashy details, like unmatching shoes, a really high up hairdo, or a hat that you could see from a distance, some t-shirt with shocking messages. Nothing sexy, mind you. That was not her point at all. It seemed more to me like she was trying to be seen. But there she was, loud and clear in ways that I would never dare be in a classroom myself. She was, well, she is, that kind of determined young girl who would speak her mind at all times. Feisty. And one day she got to the classroom looking very disturbed. She was never much of a focused student, but she would take part in most activities. Not that day, though. She looked annoyed, maybe hurt. So at some point in the lesson, I decided to ask. I walked towards her while everyone else was doing some written work, and I asked what was wrong. To what she replied by saying that some teacher in her school had told the class that being gay was a disease. And since she was sick, she didn't see the point in taking part in any activity that day. Now, you have to agree with me that these moments in the life of a teacher, they are the hardest ones, especially when we're dealing with younger students. We need to think fast. We need to think of something smart, wise to say in seconds. It needs to be comforting. It needs to be professional. And it has to be quick because the lesson must go on. And I suddenly found myself in that situation. I knew what I wanted to say, but I still needed to code it to 11-year-old mode. So the best I could come up with at the time was to simply ask, "Are you feeling sick?" And she said no. So I asked, "Are you feeling any different from how you were feeling yesterday or 2 days ago?" She said no. And then I told her, "So chances are you are probably not sick." She looked at me and she looked a bit puzzled. And then I said, "Sweetie, just because we are adults, it doesn't mean we know everything. Your teacher at school, she doesn't know everything. If she says that being gay is a disease and you are not sick, then she's probably wrong." Sometimes adults can say, at this moment, she interrupted me and asked, "Crap?" As if to test me, like, can I say a bad word in here? And I said, yes, sometimes we can say a lot of crap. And then everybody laughed. Suddenly, the mood of the lesson completely changed. And I saw on that day, in that moment, that that girl needed support. That she didn't want to look different to call our attention. She wanted to look different because she felt different. And in the middle of all this displacement that she felt, how could we make her feel included? See, I want to believe that this teacher of hers maybe didn't really meant that by what she said. And I also want to believe that she wouldn't have said that had she known about Dora and how she felt towards her own emerging sexuality. But how can we know? Can we? A few weeks later, we were doing a listening activity in which a boy and a girl discussed places to go shopping. And when the boy asked the girl if she wanted to go downtown for some clothes shopping, she replied by saying she had to go to the mall to meet her girlfriend. I remembered the scene as if it had happened yesterday. Dora stood up from her chair, big smile on her face, and asked, "Does she have a girlfriend?" This moment caused a little confusion among the 11-year-olds in the room. I saw myself wanting to say yes, even though I knew it wasn't so, because let's be realistic, course books don't include lesbian characters. So I briefly explained to her that the word girlfriend can also mean a girl that is a friend. She seemed reluctant to believe me, and she could not see it anymore. So much was the excitement for the new discovery. So I opened the dictionary page and I typed girlfriend in it. The class was then divided between the relieved and the puzzled ones. They had so many questions. They wanted to know how we know the difference, if the word is the same. How do we know, teacher? How do we know if a girl is a friend or a girlfriend? So I explained, you need to understand it in the context. To what Dora quickly replied, "But there is no context in the book." I agreed. And then she said, "So I can assume that she has a girlfriend, right?" And I had to agree to that too. And in that moment, I could see the importance of representativeness in a course book. That girl in front of me was so happy to find someone like her in the book. She was on cloud 9. She had the biggest smile for the rest of the lesson. And on that day, for the first time ever, I got a hug from her right before she left the classroom. After this episode, that was not planned at all, mind you, I could see her significantly improving in the lessons. She would sit closer to me, as if I were a person that could understand her. She would participate 10 times more and make a lot more effort to remain focused and to get words right. She would stay in the classroom a few minutes after every lesson just to make small talk, to tell me about her day, to simply show me some new song that she was listening to. Because of the accidental girlfriend, we started to bond, and that has made all the difference in her learning experience. So from that day on, I started to ask myself all the time, what are other ways we can make LGBT students feel included? In 1992, Professor Cynthia Nelson, in a speech given at TESOL convention, made some very important considerations about that. She said, and I quote, "We need to assume that we have gay students in each of our classes. We don't need to know which of our students is or might be gay. As teachers, we need to evaluate the content of our courses and the methodology we use in terms of their effectiveness with these students." And she says we must ask ourselves if gay and lesbian students feel safe in our classes. Do they feel that they can express themselves freely? Do they feel that they can choose to be open about their own sexuality, if so they wish? Or not to be open, if so they wish? Is it their choice? Because we don't always know. And this is something essential for teachers to think about. We don't always know who might or might not be gay. We don't always get to spot them right away, as if there were a set of characteristics that always present themselves. And not every gay and lesbian student is like Dora, that wants to be seen and to express herself, and that will shamelessly, explicitly feel amazed by these little hints of representativeness in a lesson. A classroom needs to be better than that, because we don't always know, and we don't have to know. It's none of our business, really. What we have to do, though, is to find ways to make them feel comfortable, welcomed, and included. And course books are not there yet. They can be amazing in terms of language, in terms of theory, but let's be honest, they still suck at representativeness. Apart from some different accents and the eventual token Black character, course books are still not diverse in a broader sense. We don't see divorced parents, we don't see single moms, gay couples, adopted children. We don't see people of different sizes or a broad age range, unless it's a lesson about family and then you have the grandfather. And we don't see gays and lesbians in course books. But these people are there in the classroom. They are not all white, straight, skinny people. So we need to improve it a little bit so students can actually see themselves in the lessons. I know this is not something that bothers a lot of people because we are all used to living like that. But by doing so, we keep slowly marginalizing the same people, generation after generation. It may not look like we're doing that because we were born in this reality, but we are, by doing nothing about it, maintaining this view. And if we do something about it, Your students will let you know if you're doing a good job. But I'll talk a little bit more about that later on. So now for the activities. I'm going to start by showing you a classic "what are they doing" activity. It's something we have all done when practicing the present continuous. We show them a picture or a set of pictures with people on it doing several different activities, and then we ask them to describe as many activities as they can. This can be done at any age. And usually the kind of picture varies according to the age of the students. Because I told you the story of Dora, I decided to keep it on 11-year-old mode. So this is a classic example of a picture for this kind of activity. Can you see anything wrong with that? If you can't see anything wrong, I'll tell you. Every kid looks the same. They are all the same size, same color, similar facial expression. There is nothing, apart from the hair color and that one kid that looks a little bit more tanned, nothing that indicates that they are different kids. And we know, I know, you know, that a real classroom does not look like this. Kids are different. In a classroom full of 11-year-olds, you can have from super short to super tall kids, thin, chubby, black, yellow, all kinds of hair, shoe size variety that would beat any store on sale. And let's not even talk about the different moods, the levels of maturity, the personalities. Well, we have some very peculiar personalities being shown in that picture, but you got the idea. They still look very similar. And I'm not even talking about skin color only. Where is the kid that is always carrying her drumsticks with them? Where's the other kid that is always carrying a skateboard with them? A set of comics, the drink that they will spill 10 minutes after the lesson has started. The one with purple hair, the one with lipstick on. Where are those kids? It seems to me like course books, in a way, end up doing what every other published media does. They try to normatize the image of what people should be, not sure according to whom. And with that, they completely erase the reality of a classroom. An ESL classroom looks more like that. All kinds of students from many different backgrounds trying to find a place to express themselves. We have people from different ages, different colors, some people running in the park, a guy that is working, kids playing ball, a person painting a picture. We even have a robot sharing his ice cream. Now, if you really want to knock it out of the ballpark, I suggest this one with the guitar playing seal next to the yellow submarine. This one is amazing because you can even practice other elements, like the guy swimming with 3 watches on, or the boy with 2 glasses, the princess in the back that seems to be considering a swim, ball gown and all, or maybe the dog drinking from a straw on the far left. This is all to say that we don't have to talk about sexuality to be inclusive, especially with younger students. We don't have to mention the topic. In fact, I am here advocating against talking about it. An inclusive classroom environment is one that represents all kids in the same way, not one that points or singles them out. And what do I mean by that? I don't mean for teachers to keep repeating that old discourse where we say we don't see color, we don't see orientation. Because color is there. Orientation is there. We are not colorblind, and our gaydars work pretty well. We know when students stand out. So let's embrace difference. Let's make them feel like it's okay to be different, that being different can be enriching. It can be like this, jumping into the pool from a giant pencil. Who wouldn't want that? Another suggestion that I have for you today is about the classic, do you have a big family? This is in most course books. We teach them family words, mother, father, grandparents, only child, etc. And then we ask them about their families. And we always ask about the family size, like in this slide. Do you have a big family, Vic? Yes, I have 2 brothers and 2 sisters. Wow, how many showers do you have? And it goes on. But rarely do we ask them about their family situation. The last time I did that in a classroom, I found out that out of 11 kids, 7 had divorced parents. And where are these parents in the course books? Of course, we teach them this kind of vocabulary nowadays because we know it's a reality. But what about the auntie who got married to another woman and adopted 2 cats? What about the divorced father who now lives with his stepkids and only sees his own kids every 2 weeks? What about the little girl who has never met her grandparents because they live in another country? The gay couple who adopted a boy? We don't see different families being mentioned, and that causes shame to people who have different family schemes. But what reality tells us is that these different families are actually the norm nowadays. In my circle of friends, it was hard to find a married couple with kids to tell a story about. So why do these students have to feel ashamed of the families that they have? And please don't tell me they don't have to feel like that, because I know they don't, but they do feel ashamed. Because the lack of representation in the materials we use makes them unconsciously feel singled out. And how do we fix that? Here I have some audio suggestions. I asked some friends to record these short statements about their own families. If you want, I can send you this material, the pictures, everything. And this is how it goes. This is Fernando.
Hi, my name is Fernando and I'm 45 years old. I am Brazilian, but I've been living in London since 1995. I am married to Mornay. He is 40 years old and he is from South Africa. In January 2015, we adopted a little boy called Jackson. He is 6 years old now. We also have a dog. His name is Fróes and he's 10 years old. We are a small family, but we are very, very happy.
As you can see, it's something very simple and very beautiful. I'm going to show you another one. This is Kirsten. I'm friends with her mom.
My name is Kirsten, and I am 12 years old. My dad, Armin, is German, and my mother, Julia, is Brazilian. My grandparents from my father's side live next door, so they are my neighbors. My grandparents from my mother's side live in Brazil. We also have a cat named Bibi. I don't go to school. Here in the United States, the parents can choose to teach their kids. My mom teaches me. I am also teaching myself Japanese. I can read, write, and speak Japanese. For Christmas, I want music CDs and a new radio. Merry Christmas, everyone.
So as you can see, this is something easy to do, asking friends to record something. And if you don't have many English-speaking friends, write to me, and I'll send you my recordings. And you can do all sorts of activities with this. You can ask them to try to draw family trees from these people's lives. You can ask specific questions to check their listening skills. You can ask them to talk or to write about a friend. The possibilities are endless. Now, it is easy to talk about the short-term results of this kind of activity. We can see it on the spot, really. Younger students will not ask many questions because they rarely see these things as strange or different. They're used to that, in fact. Their friends have families like these families. With adults, it might be a little trickier though. And you can find your usual homophobic student here and there in some lessons, but it's just as effective. Think of it as a way to open their mind as well. By naturalizing this kind of activity and by inserting it as a daily practice, you are slowly showing students that this is part of our daily reality. And they will slowly learn from this. Maybe not in the same lesson, maybe not 2 lessons later, but it will have an effect on them. And we are still not talking about it. Because these are real families, and they are not the exception. These are the families that surround us. Now, for the long-term effects, I'll tell you a quick story. Back when I started teaching, I had a student. Let's call him Igor. Igor was my student when he first started learning English, A1 level. He was about 17 years old. He would never miss a class, and he was extremely dedicated, like one of those students that don't really need us. And I was starting to, so we were both kind of learning from each other every lesson. And then I started teaching at another branch, and I never saw him again. Years later, I came back to that branch for a conversation group. And guess who was there? Now a C1 speaker. He was fairly articulate, still very dedicated, and who was now learning French as well. We didn't have any kind of close relationship, even in the classroom. And apart from some eventual Christmas pizza party at the end of the year, I hadn't talked to him much outside the classroom. I didn't know a lot about his personal life, and he seemed kind of a reserved person. He was then my student for 1.5 years, and then I left again, now to move to another job. And then 2 years later, one night, I'm getting home from my new job in a new city, and my Facebook Messenger beeps, and it was Igor. It was one long message that made me very emotional. He said that he was writing after all this time to let me know that he was now dating a boy, and that he was so happy that the first person he thought about sharing it with was me. And so he wanted to thank me, because according to him, my classroom was a place where he always felt comfortable to be himself. And that the way I treated my students made him see that he was not to feel bad about who he was. This is the best validation that a teacher can have. Something that comes from the learner. So I told you that beforehand, and I'm going to repeat it now. Learners will let you know if you're doing a good job. It may take 7 years, as it did with Igor, but they will look for you. This message was not the only message I got from a student. And with these messages, we can see how important a teacher can be to a student. We set examples. We help them think, we help them develop, discover. And if we do it right, they will remember us. If we do it very wrong, they will remember us as well. So proceed with care. And now for the end of this talk, I would like to show you something. The National Board for Professional Teaching Standards is a non-profit organization in the United States dedicated to promoting excellence in education. They develop and maintain advanced standards for educators, and they offer a national voluntary assessment called the National Board Certification, which is based on their own standards. The National Board has certified around 100,000 teachers so far. In 2016, they have issued an updated version of the booklet, What Teachers Should Know and Be Able to Do, that articulates the National Board's 5 core propositions for teaching. These 5 core propositions, comparable to medicine's Hippocratic Oath, they define the profession's vision for accomplished teaching. Inside Proposition 1, which is called Teachers are Committed to Students and Their Learning, there is a section entitled Teachers Treat Students Equitably. It talks, obviously, about equity. And I would like to read this short passage from this section because I think it talks directly to what I've been talking about here today. Educators recognize their own biases and make certain that any preconceptions based on real or perceived ability differences, exceptionalities, socioeconomic or cultural background, family configuration, sexual orientation, physical characteristics, race, ethnicity, language, religion, age, or gender do not distort the relationships with students. Accomplished teachers maintain an open mind and a balanced perspective of their students. And it continues. That approach does not suggest that teachers treat all students alike, because using the same tactics to address similar behavior by different students does not necessarily result in an equitable education. Accomplished teachers, therefore, use diversity to enrich the learning environment for every student. This is what we should all want for our students, an equitable education. There is this image that appears from time to time at some friend's timeline on Facebook that pictures what equity is about. It shows three people trying to watch a baseball game. The three of them receive a wooden box to step on, but one of them is too short to see the game, even with that help. But since they all receive the same box, this is what we call equality. This person who distributed those boxes is that teacher I mentioned before, the one that doesn't see orientation. What we need to aim for ourselves is to become a teacher who understands that different people require different boxes, or sometimes more than one, more than their friends, because not everyone needs boxes. Remember Cazuza, my idol? He didn't need boxes. He was seen the way he wanted to be seen. So let us be the teacher that makes it possible for everyone to be just like that. And with that, I will close my talk. Thank you. So these are some bibliographical references from the quotes I used in my presentation. You can see it afterwards. If you want, I can send you the PDF. I can send you the images in higher quality. I can send you the audios that I recorded from my friends. Just send me an email.
Thank you very much, Gabriela. That was really, really good, really insightful. And now we have some time for questions. Does anyone have any questions here? Oh, Mariana Casals asked one during her talk. Gabriela, do you feel that because most times teachers cannot be open in their workplaces, they have a hard time dealing with underage LGBT people as they might get in trouble with parents? It's a very good question.
That's a very good question.
Very hard one.
Yes, I'm thinking about how to answer, because I think sometimes not only we don't feel comfortable with dealing with that because of our own sexuality, but also because we are afraid of the parents, and because sometimes the school coordination doesn't give much support for us to do that, because they are afraid of losing students, and that's fair too. So this is why I do it the way I do it, like not talking about it, because nobody can say that I am, how can I say, trying
But
to
you're trying to influence students.
Exactly, because I am not. I'm showing the world as it is. I just show diversity as we have in the world, and we don't have in course books. So when you don't talk about it, but at the same time you naturalize the topic in the classroom, I think we may get the support of our coordinators and even of the parents, because we are preparing people to be better adults.
Mm-hmm. Any other questions? Let's see if people have other questions here in the chat box. So if you have any questions, please type them here in the chat box. Let's give them some time because there's a little delay.
Okay.
So. Oh, I don't think we have any other questions so far. But then, so then let me ask you a question.
Okay.
Were you ever, and I think it kind of goes back to Mariana's question, were you ever a little bit insecure about bringing these issues, even though you, as you said it yourself, you never try to influence anyone, but you know how parents are. Sometimes we do things out of goodwill, but it can be perceived otherwise.
It has never happened to me to have a parent come to me and say that I was doing something that hurt them in any way, like that offended them in any way. So and what I think is that it doesn't feel that it's not possible for a kid to get home and tell the parents, today I heard an audio about a gay couple, because they don't even notice that this is happening. If you do it as a daily practice, if you insert this as something natural in your classes, it will be natural for them as well. And so I don't think they perceive it as something different enough to comment, I don't know, during dinner and maybe have parents get offended, because it's not something, it's little things really. I don't bring like a, I don't know.
It's not a class about LGBT issues.
Never. It's never a class about LGBT. I would do that a lot in conversation groups, for example. And this is something that I'll be talking about in another talk. But with younger students, I think what we want is for them to develop critical thinking.
Mm-hmm.
And if they see the world as it is and not as course books show, they will start thinking by themselves. We don't need to put them to discuss something in class in a way that will, I don't know, put some kind of pressure on them. But it will slowly become part of their reality, as it is in their schools and in their, I don't know, with the circle of friends that the parents have. And these people are there in the world. We are there. We are part of the world. So I think if you just show the world as is for kids, they will feel comfortable and they will not, I don't know, it doesn't go back to you. I had never received any kind of complaint. I don't feel like I'm doing something that could be seen as offensive to anyone, really.
Mm-hmm. I see. All right. So, any other questions? Okay, Daniel has it's a comment. I want to learn how to deal with the giggles that inevitably come when there is a she, he, husband, wife language mistake. What to say? So she's more like sharing something that bothers her, and I don't know if there is an
Like
answer.
if a kid is telling about someone and she accidentally says he instead of she or something like that, and people laugh.
Yeah.
I think what would help with that is if we put what AJ said earlier into practice a lot more. If we start using gender neutral language in the classroom and keep it as a daily routine, maybe this would completely erase the issue, because students would start using gender neutral language in the classroom and they wouldn't. So this is maybe a suggestion. I haven't tried that. Shame on me. Yeah, but I intend to for the next year. But I don't know. The giggles, there's usually someone who will shush them at some point.
Hopefully, right?
Yes, hopefully.
All right. Does anyone have other questions to Gabriela? Okay. So if there are no other questions, Gabriela, thank you very much for coming, for taking the time to have us learn with you. It was really good.
My pleasure. Thank you very much for the opportunity. This is an amazing thing you are doing for us all. Thank you, Braut. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye. And stay tuned, because very soon we're going to have our closing plenary with the amazing Cynthia Rodriguez. And just before I leave, let me have a look here at my sheet. If you want to get the certificate for the event, you must go to bit.ly. Ly is ly/ yeah, now I found it. bit.ly/BrautQueerDay 2017 certificate altogether. Okay?
Perfect.
So see you soon. Or
see you. Bye-bye.